What's going on, everyone? It's Riley, and I am here with a special video about a favorite character of mine. Due to a recent Omnibus release, I decided, you know what, I think it's been a while since I've done a video about Western comics, looking at Omnis and stuff like that, so I wanted to do kind of a collection spotlight collecting guide for one of my favorite characters, and that is this guy over my shoulder, Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is one of my three favorite DC characters, up there with Batman and Animal Man. He's just got such a great pedigree of talent that's worked on all of his different series. Fascinating lore, just a fantastic character through and through that I have grown to deeply love. Like, basically, since I started reading any sort of Swamp Thing stuff, I just completely fell for the character and could not get enough. So I wanted to present this guide because we just got the Nancy Collins Omnibus released, and I wanted to kind of go through all of the collected editions that are out. Now, I don't have everything. I have a nearly complete collected edition set of Swamp Thing. There are some single issues that I don't have that are not collected. There's at least one collection that I don't have, so I'll mention that, but this is nearly complete, so that's why I figured this was a good time to make this video. Anyway, so I'm going to start from the beginning and kind of just run through all the different Swamp Thing stuff, give a little bit of a description of different things so you know what is going on. I will apologize ahead of time. I do not know what is in print, out of print, available, unavailable, all that good stuff. I know a few things that are harder to find, but I don't have all that information offhand. Anyway, so if we're going back to the beginning of Swamp Thing, DC has been really cool in releasing this very thick, very complete omnibus for the Bronze Age Swamp Thing. So this Bronze Age Swamp Thing omnibus, which is also being re-released as trade paperbacks, collects all of the original material with the character. This has, and I'm just going to read from the back because I don't remember offhand, his first appearance in House of Secrets number 92, written by Len Wein, Swamp Thing numbers 1 through 24 of the original series, which features a lot more material by Len Wein, and then some material from other creators like David Michelinie, Jerry Conway, and stuff like that. And then we get the first 19 issues of the second ongoing Swamp Thing series, the Saga of the Swamp Thing, which features some art, some writing from Martin Pasco, and then the Saga of the Swamp Thing annual number 1, which has a story by Bruce Jones. So some pretty big writers' names in there. And then, of course, art by Bernie Wrightson, Nestor Redondo, Tom Yates, Stephen Bissett, so John Totleben. So a lot of names that are associated with the character later on as well. So it's a pretty nice, thick volume that DC released just a few years back. This is really cool because before this omnibus was released, everything from that era had not yet been collected. We had a couple of collections that went through material from the first Swamp Thing run, but there was not a complete collection like this. And there was not, you know, a lot of this had never been collected before, like these Saga of the Swamp Thing issues, the first 19 had not been collected. So I was very thankful for them to finally release this, and there's a lot of fantastic stuff by great creators, great artists, great writers in here. Like I said, this is also being re-released as paperbacks, so if you're not one for the omnibus editions, you can look out for those. This has a cover price, though, of $99.99, so $100 for a decent, you know, 40 some odd, almost 50 issues worth of material. Now, the next run, starting with issue 20 of Saga of the Swamp Thing, is inarguably the most well-known run on the character. Extremely character-defining, and this was when Alan Moore took over on the series. Now, there are different editions of Alan Moore's run. There was an old paperback run that was released back in the earlier 2000s, and that collected across 6 volumes Alan Moore's run, but it was missing issue 20, so I believe that one actually started with issue 21 for whatever reason. Later on, DC released the run across hardcovers. These really nice hardcover volumes, still 6 volumes, but it does collect the entirety of the material. There's nothing missing, no issues omitted. The first volume of which had a textured matte dust jacket, and beneath had a really nice cover. This is probably one of the most amazing looking books that I have on my shelf, and it's a shame that it's just a normal standard hardcover, and it's also a shame that it's been long out of print. I do know that this one's been out of print. Like I said, this run was collected across the 6 standard-sized hardcovers. Uh, the first one collects issues 20 through 27. This second volume collects issues 28 through 34 and annual number 2. This third one collects issues 35 through 42, including the first appearance of John Constantine, who would, of course, go on to get his own series Hellblazer, which would last for 300 issues, of which we just received our first omnibus, and we are almost done with the new collection of trades. There's 22, 23 out right now. Fourth volume, this collects issues 43 through 50 of Swamp Thing. And let's see, we've got volume 5 here, collects issues 51 through 56. And then the final collection here, volume 6, 57 through 64. Now, the hardcovers, I don't know which ones, I know the first one and probably more, are out of print, harder to find, but DC did release those exact collections across paperback, and those I'm sure, I think are still pretty easy to find, which would make sense because they would want to keep that kind of available. However, DC has started to release the Alan Moore's Saga of the Swamp Thing across a series of Absolute Editions, and I do have the first Absolute Edition right here. Now this, I think that they took a note out of how that first hardcover was put together, because this has kind of a similar, they've done a similar job with how it's been built, especially underneath the cover. This is probably one of my top 5 nicest books that I have in my collection. It has a distinct mossy feel to the cover, which is unlike any book that I've had. So they don't try and make it feel like a normal hardcover book. It's not leather bound feeling like a lot of different books get, like Preacher and Sandman, but it has a very distinct mossy feel, and it actually has a little bit of a scent that is distinct from other hardcovers, other collections that are out there. The reason, though, why I have the Absolute and I've also got the hardcovers I will show is because DC, in their Absolute Edition, and they do this often, it's not a new thing, decided that they would go ahead and recolor. The recoloring, a lot of people really, really dislike, like absolutely hate. I find it to be, I understand why they did it. And I think it's okay, but I prefer the original coloring. So that's why I stuck with my original hardcovers, is because I wanted to maintain a collected edition of the original artwork. So the original artwork, you can see there's more kind of stylistic choices with the colors. Swamp Thing being bright green, dark blue trees, yellow skies, and stuff like that. But if we look in the Absolute Edition, the colors are kind of edited to be a more quote-unquote realistic view. So there's a lot more, I guess, contrast and depth and stuff. There's more shading on the character than you'd get in the other one. The trees are brown with shadows and stuff. The sky looks more natural. Which kind of takes away from the mood that was set by the original coloring. I can see why they would adjust it in this way, and you can find a lot more examples online. I could make a whole video just going through and comparing examples and stuff, but that's not what I'm here for. So if you want to see more, I would suggest going online and looking it up. But it looks like DC is trying to keep this book in print because they've already announced that they're doing a reprint of Volume 1 and the second volume is coming out. I do plan on keeping both of my editions, the old hardcovers plus the absolutes of that. So moving on from Alan Moore's run, we start to get into a point where there's some stuff that's not yet collected. Back when in the earlier 2000s, when they did the paperback editions, DC didn't stop with Volume 6 at the end of Alan Moore's run. They actually kept going to collect Rick Veitch, sorry if I don't pronounce the name correctly, his run. Now, his run was one that was famously ended at DC. Issue number 88, I believe it was, he had an idea for his story. The issue was pretty much complete. There's actually artwork out there. The entire script is done for that issue, but it featured some religious stuff that DC ultimately was not comfortable publishing, and so they told him that they couldn't publish that issue. He quit the series, and it was actually meant to be Jamie Delano and Neil Gaiman were meant to take over Swamp Thing after he left, but in solidarity with Rick, they decided they would not be hanging around on the series. They would not be doing that run anymore. Now, DC did release 3 trade paperbacks collecting part of his run, and it does retain the same kind of style of storytelling as Moore's run. It's been a while since I've read these, and I never read the rest of his run that was not collected in these paperbacks, but I remember as I was reading them thinking it's a very worthy successor to what Moore was doing. So if you enjoyed Moore's run and you want more of that, then you can track these down. They are pretty expensive. I know that these are out of print and harder to find, but there are 3 of these, so I'll go through and show these real quick. The first one, volume 7, and you can see it is labeled as such, is titled Regenesis, and this collects issues 65 through, sorry, I want to get it right, through 70 of the series. Volume 8 is Spontaneous Generation, and this collects issues 71 through 76 on the series. And then the third one, volume 9, is Infernal Triangles, and this collects issues 77 through 81 plus annual number 3. So that said, issues 82 through 87 by Rick Veitch are not collected. So it would have been one more trade paperback at volume 10. This material is available to read on the DC Universe app, however, so if you do want to continue reading, or maybe you don't want to fork over the extra money for these rare out-of-print books, you can go onto the DC Universe app and read his entire run, as well as the rest of his run. Issues number, and I have this on my tablet, that's why I'm looking down because I don't have it memorized, issues 89. Starting with issue 89, we have Doug Wheeler come on. Tom Yeats retains his spot as the artist, at least at the beginning of that run. And then Wheeler continues to write the series through issue number 109. So he has a pretty decent little 20 issue or so run on the series. This was not collected anywhere, at least not yet. It has not been collected. So issues 88 through 109, I believe is what I said, are uncollected anywhere. But again, you can go onto the DC Universe app and you can read those stories there. This is material that I personally have not read, so I cannot speak for the quality myself. This is something that I've been waiting basically since the Nancy Collins book, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, is out now. I'm probably going to do a big read of everything all the way through. But this takes us, so 1991, July 91 is the cover date for his last issue. Now this brings us to the book I've been mentioning, the Nancy A. Collins Omnibus. Now this was a major surprise and a very welcome one for me that this was actually getting published. I was completely blown away that that DC would actually put this book out, because Nancy Collins is not exactly like an A-list writer as far as it goes with comics. She's not a household comic writer name. She's done work here and there. She's done this. I know that she's mentioned that she wanted to take over on Hellblazer as well, but at the time, DC and Vertigo wanted someone that was actually from the UK to write the series, and she was not, which is funny because later they would get writers like, I know, for instance, Jason Aaron wrote a couple of issues, and he's not from the UK. He's very American. Anyway, that aside, this is the other run that I haven't read. Of all of the Swamp Thing stuff that exists, basically the end of Rick Veitch all the way through Nancy Collins is the material that I have not read. So this collects issues 110 through 139, and annuals number 6 and 7, as well as Black Orchid number 5, and a story from Vertigo Jam #1. So none of this has been reprinted ever before. So this is very cool. First time for this to happen. The tagline on the back is returning Swamp Thing to his Southern Gothic horror roots. Very beautiful book. I think it was a $125 cover price, and that is one of my favorite Swamp Thing images of all time. I actually had it on a phone case about 6 years ago for an old phone of mine. Yeah, $125. Let's look underneath, because I know underneath the dust jacket is also rather attractive looking. Yeah, very nice artwork all around. Just a beautiful volume. So they definitely put forth a lot of good effort into releasing this book, and I'm hoping that it succeeds enough that they might go and release more material of Swamp Thing in Omnibus. But I'll talk about like what my wishes are for the series later. Now, after she leaves the series, we enter into the final run on the Saga of the Swamp Thing series, and that is Swamp Thing from Mark Millar. Now, the first 4 issues of Mark Millar's run were co-written by Grant Morrison. After that, Morrison leaves, and he leaves Mark Millar to his own devices to complete the rest of the run. This was not collected until several years ago. I want to say probably 4 years ago or less, when they started collecting this in paperback. And there are 3 volumes that wrap up this Saga of the Swamp Thing series and Mark Millar's run. This first one, this is titled The Root of All Evil. The artwork throughout is mostly Phil Hester, and this collects issues 140 through 150 of the series. The next one, the second volume, is Darker Genesis. This collects issues 151 through 160, so another 10 issues of the run right here. And then the third and final book is Trial by Fire. And this concludes Mark Millar's run, collecting issues 161 through 171 of the series. And this is this was a fun run. I really, myself, I enjoyed this run. I enjoyed finally being able to read this as it came out in paperback. I went into it without reading any of the stuff that came before, so I didn't read Collins, like I said, or the Doug Wheeler run. So if you want to jump in on this, you probably can without a ton of information leading into it. Basically, just understand, I think the quintessential run to me is more. And if you read more and you get an understanding of the Parliament of Trees and the green and all of that stuff, then this will be accessible to you. Basically, Millar comes up with the idea to introduce more avatars from different parliaments. So you have, the avatar of, if Swamp Thing is the avatar for like earth and the fire, or not fire, and the plants and the green and all that stuff, there's one for fire, there's one for wind, water, rocks and stuff like that. So all these different avatars kind of come forth in this series. It's really fun. It's a good, interesting run. Again, I really liked it. Now after this, we come to, I'm trying to think, there's one piece that I don't know exactly where in continuity it falls, so I'm trying to make sure. It might come after this. Yeah, I think this piece, and this is one that a lot of people don't know about. I believe this is the next published piece, and this is Swampthing Roots by John J. Muth. This is just a small graphic novel. It does not focus on Alec Holland at all. It focuses on a different Swamp Thing from back in 1943 is when it's set. So this is a different character. This is a different version of the Swamp Thing. It's been a while since I read it. I remember it being okay. Not the greatest story in the world, just an interesting. If you want more Swamp Thing, it's a fun little book to pick up. And it's not that expensive either. The cover price is $8. I saw it recently just before making this video. I looked it up to see if it was harder to find. Saw it for like $10. So it's just a small little graphic novel published under Vertigo with art and writing by John J. Muth. It's pretty nice looking painted artwork. If you're a really big Swamp Thing fan like myself, that's something you might just want to get to complete the collection. But that's one that a lot of people have no idea even exists. So that's why I wanted to point it out. And I think that this is it was published, I think it said in 1999 or so is when it was done, 1998. So I think it does fit after the end of Saga of the Swamp Thing and before the next series. The next one's also a little bit different. Again, it does not focus on Alec Holland, but instead on his daughter, Tefe Holland. And this was a Vertigo Swamp Thing title that has not been collected until about 5 or 6 years ago, written by Brian K. Vaughan. Of course, Brian K. Vaughan is a huge name now. He's known for stuff like Y the Last Man, Ex Machina, and of course the currently ongoing Image series Saga. But over here, he did a somewhat short, I think it was 20 issues, Swamp Thing run focused on Tefe. And it was a fun little adventure series. I had never read it before this. I read it here. It features her kind of going on a road trip towards this goal. The first volume here collects the first 9 issues, Vertigo Secret Files and Origins, and a story from Winter's Edge #3. And then his run is completed in this second volume, which collects issues 10 through 20, and Vertigo Secret Files and Origins Swamp Thing. So yes, his entire run is collected across those 2 volumes. This leads us to the next Vertigo run, which is another chunk of material that's not completely collected. This one, though, I do have every issue that's not collected. I have the physical issue, so I can at least show that stuff off. Now, a new series started up after that, and the first 6 issues were written by Andy Diggle, and it's collected in this book called Swampthing Bad Seed. Most of the artwork through this series was done by Enrique Breccia. I can show examples of his artwork here. So this is basically what you can expect from throughout this series. It's been a while, probably 10 years since I've read this, so I don't remember thinking too much of it then. And most people I talked to who had read it also didn't think too much of it either, and that might explain why it was never fully collected. I do recall not that long ago seeing on if there was a solicit, or I know I saw something on Amazon where it looked like they were re-releasing this, and I don't know if they were trying to re-release it in a more complete edition, since there is material that's not collected here. But this, like I said, is Andy Diggle, who later on you might know his name from stuff like over at Marvel. He did a run on the Thunderbolts, and he did the Daredevil that led into the infamous Shadowland event, but he did the first 6 issues on this Vertigo Swamp Thing series. There are 2 issues that were not collected, issues number 7 and 8. This was a short story with that's written by Will Pfeiffer with artwork by Richard Corbin. So kind of notable little story. I have those in the singles since it was not collected anywhere. And then there are 2 more paperbacks of this run. After the short 2-issue Pfeiffer Corbin story, we get Enrique Breccia back on the artwork, and we have Joshua Dysart come on as the writer. Joshua Dysart has done several things over at Valiant, and then he also did an Unknown Soldier series at Vertigo, which was really well received. Fantastic series. So the first of the 2 other collections is called Love in Vain, and this collects issues 9 through 14 of that ongoing series. And then the third and last collection of this run with the same creators, this one also featuring some artwork by Ron Wimberly, that he's known for Prince of Cats, and he did a couple issues I know from the Charles Soule She-Hulk series, and then we also have some more Richard Corbin artwork in here, and that is Healing the Breach. This collects issues 15 through 20 of the series. Now, they could have collected the rest of it in just 1 more paperback, but unfortunately DC let that one just not happen, and so we have the rest of it. I believe is all written by Joshua Dysart. I'll look and make sure as I pull them up, but here's 21. Issue number 22. There's really great, these are all covers by Eric Powell, by the way, who's known from The Goon. There's issue 23, issue number 24. Again, just double checking to make sure that creator doesn't change. I'm pretty sure it's Josh Dysart for the rest. 25, issue number 26. 27. That is a really nice cover. 28. And the final issue, number 29. So, yes, once Joshua Dysart takes over, he does the rest of that run. Unfortunately, those last 9 issues are not collected anywhere. Now, moving on, Swamp Thing did not have his own series for a number of years, unfortunately. However, he did appear, I believe, in the pages of Hellblazer, I believe under Mike Carey's run. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that that was one of the places where he showed up. But it was a while before we had another actual Swamp Thing storyline, especially in the DC universe. He hadn't been part of the DC universe for a good minute. But in the end of the Brightest Day storyline, the storyline that was the aftermath of Blackest Night, the big event that spun out of the Green Lantern by Jeff Johns runs, he had appeared, and this is spoilers for Brightest Day. At the very end of Brightest Day, he appears as the new avatar of the white light, you know, the avatar of life, which makes sense because he's the avatar of the green, which is over all the life on Earth and stuff like that. So he appears briefly at the end of that. And this leads into a short mini-series that was never collected anywhere called Brightest Day Aftermath, The Search for Swamp Thing, which had John Constantine, who is also reintroduced into the DC universe proper at the end of Brightest Day, goes on a search to find the Swamp Thing because he is meant to be taking over as the new avatar of Earth. And it features different characters. I think Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman all appeared in there. It was written by, is it Charles Rankin? I don't remember, but it was only 3 issues. Like I said, it's never been collected anywhere. I did have the single issues years back, but since then I no longer have them. I think I sold them when I moved away from my parents' home. So after this, of course, after Brightest Day, it wasn't too much longer before they did the Flashpoint event, which led into the New 52, and it was kind of the big soft reboot of the DC universe. And with that, we got a new Swamp Thing series. In the New 52, we had Swamp Thing taken over by Scott Snyder, who had recently been making his name by doing the Batman book. He did Batman. At that time, the Black Mirror arc was the first story that he had done, and it was very well praised, and so he winds up doing Batman New 52, and as well doing Swamp Thing New 52 with artist Yannick Paquette. And that is collected here in this really nice deluxe edition. Of course, this deluxe edition is out of print. I don't know about the paperbacks, but the first, there are 3 paperback editions that make up the contents in this. They might be cheaper, easier to get than getting this one at the moment. But if you can find it, if you can get it, I definitely recommend grabbing this book because it is really beautiful. It has fantastic artwork from Yannick Paquette and Marco Rudy. This collects issues 0 through 18 of the New 52 Swamp Thing run, as well as Animal Man number 12 and 17, and Swamp Thing Annual number 1. There was Animal Man at the time crossed over with Swamp Thing. There was a big storyline. So you'll see also in the Animal Man Omnibus by Jeff Lemire, there are a couple of issues of Swamp Thing where they had kind of the storyline with Swamp Thing and the green and Animal Man and the red going against the Rot, which was the kind of everything. If the red is animal life and the green is plant life, then that is death is shown by the Rot, which is led by Anton Arcane, classic Swamp Thing character and villain. Now, after after Scott Snyder leaves the series with issue 18, we then see Charles Soule take over and do a fantastic run that unfortunately is only collected in paperbacks. Now, this, I don't know the availability of these paperbacks, but I'll go through these. Volume 4, his first book on the series, is titled The Cedar, and this collects issues 19 through 23 and 23.1. And then we get volume 5. This is The Killing Fields, collects issues 24 through 27, as well as annual number 2. And this goes into volume 6, The Serene. This is collecting issues 28 through 34, and pages from Aquaman number 31. Swamp Thing appeared briefly in the pages of Aquaman at the time. And then finally, he wraps up the run with volume number 7, Season's End, which features 35 through 40, Swamp Thing Annual number 3, and Swamp Thing Futures End number 1. So this wraps up everything by Charles Soule in these 4 volumes. I have been wanting for a long time for them to do a deluxe edition of Soule's run like the Snyder run, but it's been years. It hasn't happened. I'm not counting on it happening anytime soon. But Charles Soule's run with artist Jesus Saiz is fantastic. I met him at a signing, and this was back when he had just come on the book, maybe a few issues in. I had him sign a copy of one of the issues that he had written, and I let him know, I was like, your run is one of the best Swamp Thing runs I've read since Alan Moore's. And he thanked me profusely for that comment. And then I went on and got him to sign a couple of other things. But anyway, I love it. I highly recommend it. If you can get those books, definitely grab them. He kind of takes some notes from what Mark Millar was doing with the different parliaments and stuff like that. So you don't have to be entirely familiar with that, but it does help to know a little bit about that. It's reintroduced because it's the New 52, so everything's new again. Everything old is new again. But it does help to have a little context, but you can go on to Wikipedia and stuff if you don't want to read the Mark Millar run. Anyway, Swamp Thing's run ended with issue number 40. There were a lot of series that ended around that time, and we went into a period called DCU, which was DCYOU. It was supposed to be the next stage after the New 52. It was kind of the end of the New 52. It lasted for the last year or so of that. And in that time, right after issue 40, we had the Convergence event, which was honestly a waste of space. And it was just a Band-Aid event that was meant to be a bunch of like pre-written material that they would publish during the couple of months that DC was moving their offices from coast to coast. The event itself was dumb, but there was a bunch of tie-ins, a bunch of 2-issue tie-ins, and several of them were actually written by really great creative teams. For instance, there was a Question miniseries by Greg Rucka, something like that is a good example. There was a 2-issue Swamp Thing miniseries at that time, written by the creator Len Wein, with artwork by Kelly Jones. And these 2 issues were fantastic, great Swamp Thing related material. I absolutely loved it. And it is collected in paperback, and this is one of the few paperbacks that I do not own. It is only right now collected in Convergence, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Volume 2, or Book 2, along with a bunch of other stuff. I think along with like Wonder Woman and Plastic Man or something like that. So there's several miniseries in there, but that collects the Swamp Thing related miniseries. Wein and Jones would go on then to write another Swamp Thing series, which is collected in this volume, The Dead Don't Sleep. Now, this is a 6-issue miniseries, but it was originally meant to be an ongoing series. It was going to be ongoing, continuing to be written by Wein with artwork by Kelly Jones, but unfortunately around this time was when Len Wein had passed. So the series got canceled, and we have some material we actually have the complete artwork of the 7th issue. I'll mention that, or I'll show that in a second. So anyway, yes, so this is kind of a return to form. It's more of a horror type story. It brings back, I think, Anton Arcane as the antagonist here. It's a really, really nice return to form for the character, kind of going back to the classic roots of where Swamp Thing was in the past. This is a great miniseries. Collected all in this one volume. It's only $16.99 cover price, so it should be pretty cheap and easy to find online if you're interested. Now, like I said, that's 6 issues. Issue 7 was released as part of the Swamp Thing Winter Special. During Rebirth, we'd still do not have a new ongoing Swamp Thing series. The first, there was an appearance of Swamp Thing, several appearances. He's appeared in Justice League Dark as part of that team, written by James Tynion IV. But he also made an appearance in an issue of Batman by Tom King. And Tom King's issue with Swamp Thing was so well received that he went on to write a one-shot called, I think it was just the Swamp Thing Winter Special. And that winter special was then collected along with some other material in this hardcover called The Roots of Terror Deluxe Edition. Now this contains material, that entire winter special issue, which contains the story by Tom King, as well as what would have been issue 7 of Len Wein and Kelly Jones's ongoing Swamp Thing run. So it has the entire 21-page story, artwork completely colored, inked, and everything, just without any dialogue. So that is in there in this collection, as well as in that one-shot if you just buy the one-shot by itself. The collection, however, as well as being oversized hardcover with larger artwork, it also collects material from Swamp Thing Halloween Horror Giant #1, Young Monsters in Love #1, and Cursed Comics Cavalcade #1. So there's material written by Mark Russell and Tim Seeley and Brian Azzarello in this, with artwork by Jason Fabok, Greg Capullo, Fraser Irving, and Kyle Hotz, as well as the material from Kelly Jones. So this is a pretty neat little collection. It's a thin hardcover, but this is the only collected edition that you can get that final Kelly Jones Len Wein story in. And that brings us to our final book, this one right here, Tales from the Bayou. This was released just recently, I think earlier this year. This is a trade paperback, $16.99 cover price, so not very expensive. Double dips with most of what's in there. So it collects Tom King's story from the winter special, as well as the story from Young Monsters in Love, the story from Cursed Comics Cavalcade, the story from the Halloween Horror Giant. But this also collects Tim Seeley's stories from the Swamp Thing Giants #1 through 7. Swamp Thing Giant is that was the series of larger trim sized issues that you could pick up at Walmart stores. They also had a Batman series that had stories by Brian Bendis. Tom King wrote stories for a Superman series. I think there was an Aquaman story out there. But a bunch of different series received these Walmart special issues. A lot of it was reprints of classic stories, but they would all feature new material by these artists, and those new stories are just now getting reprinted in new collections. So Batman Universe is the Brian Bendis Batman story. Superman, I think Up in the Sky is the title of that one. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on it, but that's the Tom King Superman story, both of which are really great stuff. And then this Tales from the Bayou collects the stories by Tim Seeley from for the Swamp Thing issues. So it does mostly double dip with what's in here. The only thing that's in here that is not in here is the Len Wein story, the artwork by Kelly Jones. And in here we have the 7 issues, but it's like a short, like 8 pages, so it's not 7 full issues. But we have the 7 installments of Tim Seeley's run right here. So this is the most recently released Swamp Thing trade paperback. There's one other collection off the top of my head that I do not have, and it's kind of Swamp Thing. And I'm not talking about any team books. So like I mentioned, Justice League Dark, I'm not pulling that, or a bunch of appearances and stuff. This is just for Swamp Thing for himself. But there was a book released a little while ago called The Secret Spiral of Swamp Kid. And that was, I forget who the creator was on that, but it was more of a young reader story from DC's Zoom line, which is like supposed to be meant for younger readers, young teenagers, preteens, and stuff like that. And it focused on a new character, not Alec Holland, this new character who was called Swamp Kid, and it's meant to look like a spiral notebook, and it's kind of his just drawings and stuff. I've not read it. I don't own it. I've read some good things about it, that it's a really great book for younger readers and stuff, so I might at some point get it just for completion's sake. And then there is currently a digital first miniseries titled Swampthing New Roots, written by Mark Russell, who's known for his work on stuff like the Flintstones, Snagglepuss, and stuff like that. So I don't know how many issues that's going to be. I think 4 issues are out right now, and eventually that would surely be collected in paperback too. So that's everything. That's my collection. That's everything that's out. I've mentioned the stuff that's not collected, the stuff that I don't own. If I've missed anything, please comment down below. It's, you know, I'm going through the entire existence in collected edition format and the entire, you know, library of a certain character, so I'm probably missing something here or there. So sound off below if I've missed anything. Now, as far as if I was to make a wish list of what I would like to see from Swamp Thing, from different editions DC releasing, I would love to see because my preferred format is Omnibus, so I would love to see the Alan Moore run released across a couple of Omnibus. And I would love to see the Rick Veitch run, or Rick Veitch, however you pronounce his name. I apologize if I mispronounce anything. Collected in its own volume. And I know that that does not have a real conclusion to it, but his run is fantastic. There's great artwork, great storytelling there. And it's big enough that it would fill out a good-sized omnibus. And just for completion's sake, give Doug Wheeler, tripping over my own words here, his own volume as well. At the very least, I would like to see those things collected in some format. If it doesn't get an omnibus, if it never happens in omnibus form, I'm not going to, you know, riot or anything. It would just be a great thing. I think it'd be awesome. Mark Millar's run, though, I think is solid enough, and it's accessible enough to new people that I think that one should get some sort of deluxe treatment, whether it be an omnibus or something like that. I would love to see new paperback editions of the Vertigo series that was started by Diggle. I'm not going to say I want to see an omnibus or anything like that. I don't think that'll ever happen, but I would love to see if DC would re-release that series across 2 or 3 thick trade paperbacks to kind of give us the entire run. As of right now, you know, they're missing 11 out of the 29 issues, so it's a little bit disappointing there. And I mentioned this as I was going through and talking about everything, but I would also really love a hardcover deluxe edition collection of Charles Soule's run on Swamp Thing. Finally, though, I think this would be really a great thing to put together. I would love to see a collection that combines the 6-issue series from the Dead Don't Sleep collection by Len Wein with Kelly Jones, and combine this with the 2 issues of the Convergence story, as well as the artwork from the would-be number 7 that came from the winter special. So a total of 9 issues worth of material combined into one volume, put that in an oversized edition to celebrate Len Wein, to celebrate him as the creator of this character, and just to combine all of the great Kelly Jones work. And I know that there's some other Kelly Jones artwork. He's done pinups and stuff of the character that they can throw in there as bonus features. So that would be my wish list. I'm hoping that at some point in the near future that the character gets a new ongoing series, because I love Swamp Thing again. And I love seeing new stuff. I love seeing new creators try their foot at him. I have not read the Mark Russell miniseries that's going on right now just yet. I'll get to that soon, but I'm excited because I love Mark Russell as a creator. I have no idea what he's going to bring to that character, so it's going to be cool to bring it, to check it out. Anyway, this was a long video, so thank you so much for watching. I hope that this is helpful for some people in seeing what's out there, putting your eyes on what exists as far as this character, and I hope that maybe I've turned on someone to try out Swamp Thing. If you're looking for anything to try out, check out Alan Moore's run. The paperback should be available, so check out at least the first 1 or 2 volumes of that and then go from there. That was really what turned me into a huge Swamp Thing fan, and I hope that it can do the same for others. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this long video. Hope everyone's out there staying safe, healthy, and happy, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.